second, but it's really cool to taste wines that are made of similar grapes from different places. It was one of the things that I really gravitated towards in learning about wine, and still do, but especially when I was in the depth of my studies for the Master Sommelier certification. So my name's Thomas Price. I live in Seattle, Washington. I am National Director of Wine Education for Jackson Family Wines. There are a few of our wines in this flight for your enjoyment. There's also a distributor that we own and manage in California called Regal. And it's always fun for me to get to work with those wines in that portfolio because it's all our family-owned stuff, as well as winery trade partners is what we call them. But we have a couple of wines from Bouchard, which is a great producer. 1731 is when Bouchard was founded in Burgundy. That would be a long time ago. But it's always fun for me to work with our Regal team. Thank you in advance to Kyle, and I think Vito's on the call. Hey, Lise, I see Lisa's here. But it's really fun for me to get a chance to not only talk about Jackson Family Wines, but talk about some of our European counterparts as well. I think it's a way we can all learn and compare. The first thing I would say for the call is everybody, if you have stuff open, feel free to taste. All right. Don't wait for me to lead you through every single detail. Maybe save some in case I say something smart about the wine at some later component of our tasting, but don't wait. If you feel like tasting red first, taste red. If you feel like tasting white first, taste white. We're just here to have fun on a Friday evening and chat about wines. I passed my Master Sommelier examination in 2012. I have been with Jackson Family since 2014. On the supplier side, which is what we call it when you work for a winery, this is the only non-restaurant job I've had in my entire career. And I love the company. I love working for this company. It's very dynamic and very interesting. And the wines, first and foremost, for me, are delicious and really fun to kind of talk about and discuss. What else can I tell you about myself? I don't like talking about myself that much. But I grew up in Alaska. I live in Seattle, and I passed a super hard test on wine and just love drinking wine and eating food every day. Hopefully somebody or everybody has something to sort of nibble on as we go through this great flight of wines.
All right. That's very exciting, Thomas. So tonight's thing is old world versus new world. And I think when I started my somm journey, that was one of the topics that's very important to understand.
Yeah.
But not everyone really know what that means. So can you just kind of go over what are we talking about when we're talking in terms of new world and old world?
Yeah. So I mean, and again, I always, I know we have a lot of different levels of wine knowledge on the call, and I don't want to talk under anyone or over anyone's level, but I'll just keep it very simple. Old world is Europe, essentially. Wines from Europe are old world wines. That's where a lot of the laws that are still sort of loosely followed around the world today in terms of regulation and stuff were formed. A lot of French stuff, not surprisingly, but there's some patterns in Italy and Germany, et cetera, Spain as well. And the New World is everything else. Australia, South Africa, even though I would, on a separate call, I could pontificate on why I think South Africa should be considered as an old world wine region, but that's a whole separate conversation. So in a nutshell, Europe is old world and the rest of the world is new world. I would say this as a general touch point. To me, old world wines are driven, European wines are generally driven by a higher level of minerality. They can't irrigate. They are in climates that are tricky to farm. New World wines, everything's on the table. You can water the grapes if it's a hot day, or you don't have to water them if it's not a hot day. You don't have specific amounts of grapes you can harvest based on whatever region you're in, right? If it's a great vintage in California and our winemakers think, wow, man, the fruit's perfect, we can pull 3 tons, 4 tons an acre off of a site. In Europe and a lot of these places, especially in Burgundy, where we're kind of starting our journey tonight, it's very strict. It's 35 hectoliters per hectare. A hectare is basically 2.5 acres for everybody on the call. So it's kind of a rules and climate and farming specific versus no rules and people can do anything they want. That's how I would sort of encapsulate New World versus Old World, or Old World versus New World, excuse me, in a nutshell. Does that make sense to everybody?
Makes sense to me. Yeah,
super interactive, Angie. I mean, if anyone has a question, unmute and jump in or type it in the chat bar. This is probably, like almost everyone on this call, this is my probably 55th Zoom call in about 80 days, or maybe even more than that. So I'm starting to get the hang of things. But I love this. I love this platform because it really is easy to unmute and say something and get whatever point you like clarified across. So I just want to make sure. Angie, are you cool if we jump into the wines?
Let's do it.
Okay, awesome. So, and this is another virtual tasting thing I've learned. Hopefully, all the wines that are in front of us all in our various locations. I would imagine, Angie, most folks that are on the call are in California.
That's correct. Yes.
Raise your hand if you're not in California.
I think we have.
So that's a good sign.
Yeah.
But I did a thing for a group of bankers and financiers in the Southeast last night, and while our wines all had the same labels, our vintages were markedly different, which is fine. But for this particular type of tasting, I think it's very, very cool, and hopefully we've got the same vintages in front of everyone. So let's just jump into the wines. The very first wine, and I for the call, I love doing, as we taste, let's do Old World first, I'll talk about, and then New World. So we'll do the Chardonnays, we'll do the Pinot Noirs, and then we'll do the Merlot-based wines that have a little bit of Cabernet and some other Bordelais varieties in them. So the first wine, and I knew this intellectually, but Bouchard was founded in 1731. Holy smokes. That would be a long time ago, right? For a winery and wine company and family to found their business. This particular vineyard, Clos-en-Landry, was purchased in 1791 by the Bouchard family. Again, crazy stuff. I've got this little map on this text sheet in front of me. And again, I studied all this stuff coming up through the Court of Master Sommeliers study sort of platform. But this is a white wine vineyard that is surrounded by a bunch of red wine vineyards in the town of Beaune. Beaune is kind of the business center of Burgundy. There's 100% Chardonnay. And I think the most remarkable thing about this wine to me, and I'd love to get some comments from people on this, this is 2011 is the wine I have in front of me. This is a 9-year-old white wine that to me is fresh and vibrant and interesting and still is showing tropical fruit and isn't like crazily oxidized, and oxidized means like nuts and other stuff besides fruit. I popped this wine earlier today as I was researching it, because that's always been a study method of mine. And I was blown away by how this wine's showing given its age, and given the fact that white wines generally aren't known to really age that great, unless you're talking about Riesling or some white Burgundies and some other white wines. But I was blown away by this. This site is 2 hectares, so it's a 5-acre site. And then the last thing I talk about before I open up for a little discussion about this wine and see what people think, is it's a monopole. Okay, and what that means in Burgundy has a very fractured sort of ownership structure, because families would give parts of vineyards to each of their children and say, okay, George, you get this, and Fred, you get that. I'm not using very Burgundian French names right now, but you guys understand what I'm saying. So this is a wholly owned vineyard in this particular part of Beaune by the Bouchard family, again, that they've owned since 1791. And it's Chardonnay from the heart and surrounded by a bunch of red wine. It's a really cool story. I think it's just delicious. Anybody have thoughts on this wine, and like it, don't like it? It's okay to disagree with me. I was blown away. Edward, what do you got?
Yeah, I had a full bottle of this with a friend yesterday with Morimoto. It's absolutely delicious.
Nice. Good practicing, man. That's awesome.
Thought I'd get a preview.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I think you'll see, like I've had my bottle open for about 2 or 3 hours, and it's a little cold still for me right now, but man, you're going to start to see a bunch more tropical and just roundness and texture start to come out of it. And 11, that's one more thing I'll talk about. And I'll talk about the Stone Street in a second. Please have a taste of that. But 2011 in Burgundy was like a cold vintage all over the world. It was cold in California. It was cold in Burgundy. They had hail. They had all kinds of issues. And this vintage was roundly sort of panned by critics at the time. And it's amazing to me how many vintages from wine regions all over the world, when critics say that was terrible or it's going to be rough or blah, 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 they age so beautifully. I think this wine, I didn't know what to expect. I love this vineyard, and I've tasted this wine over many vintages. It's been a minute since I've had the 11, but I think it's just crushing it right now. I think it's in a really, really good place, and I hope everybody feels the same way.
Well, I so agree with the 11, because I was working at K&L tasting the 11s, and all the reviews were like, cold vintage, no good. And now to see it, like, there's still great acidity and like limestone and pith and like drive to it, but it's softened up so nicely that if you put that in front of me, I would not be guessing 11 Burgundy now.
No chance. No. And Kyle, I love that observation. Like, if I was blind tasting this wine, there's no way I'd take it back that far.
Yeah, no.
Probably be 14 or 15 at the latest. There's no way I'd take this to 11, because it's got some richness. It's round. It's got the tropical fruit starts to come out as it warms up. It's fire, as the kids would say. I like that.
Well, and it's such a good rule of thumb too. Like, I love 98 in California, because they were panned similarly, right? Like, it's cold, it's rainy, El Nino, all those, and some of those wines are just drinking so well, and they're affordable, especially compared to like 97, where it's like the best vintage ever. You're going to pay all these premiums. 1 year later, those wines are amazing. So it's such a good rule to follow.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And we can let's taste the Stone Street, because I think this was my favorite and least. I would say this: if you put these two wines in front of me and said which one is Old World and which one is New World, I think I'd get there. The rest of the flight is really obvious to me with the Anderson Valley Pinot and the Von Romane, and then the Saint-Emilion and the Mount Brave. But this flight, I'd be like, God, I got to think about this for a minute after I taste the Stone Street. It's got a lot of cut. I love, Kyle, I'm going to use the word drive. Again, that was really good. There is such a freshness and linear sort of expression to the Stone Street that I think I would get there from a kind of stony minerality component with the Close on Laundry from Bouchard, and I'd figure it out. Stone Street finishes a little bit richer, and there's a little bit, at least perceptibly to me, more alcohol. There's a little bit more richness. But man, this is what a cool thing. I wish Lisa Valtenberg from Stone Street was on this call and tasting these two wines together. And I've tasted a bunch of Burgundy next to Stone Street Chardonnay with her. They're not similar in their expression, right? But they are not, it's not like, oh, there's, Puligny Montrachet and there's Rombauer or whatever, right? These are pretty aligned in their structural components, is what I would say. I don't know if anyone on the call gets that. I mean, I think there's a little more color on the Stone Street.
There's more structure for sure, like more density. I think there's a little more phenolic tannin, phenolic bitterness going on here for the
I would agree, right? I mean, you can use
broad shoulder,
but man, if you guys when we get into the reds, it's like the difference is so much more stark than it is with these two to me, which is really cool. I'll talk briefly about Stone Street. I was actually originally hired as the Stone Street brand ambassador at Jackson Family Wines way back in 2014. And I had visited the property before as a buyer for a restaurant that I worked at in Seattle called the Metropolitan Grill, and was invited down there. I did a lot of business with them, et cetera, et cetera. It's one of the most unique and amazing vineyard sites in the world, literally bar none. And I felt that way before I worked for the company, and I feel that way now. This, I believe in 16, most of the fruit is, and this is upper barn, right? So it's still on its original rootstock. It yields about a ton and a half an acre. We've considered ripping it out and replanting it, which would be financially very smart to do, but we just feel so strong about the level of quality that this vineyard produces. And again, this all the other wines are super delicious, but this particular pairing gets my geek radar going like crazy. It's really, really fun to taste these two single vineyard wines side by side.
Thank you. I'm so glad you agree. Oh, go ahead, Kyle.
I had a question for Thomas. Is this possibly one of the highest elevation Chardonnay vineyards in California?
100%. Yeah, I mean, I think, where is Upper? It's like 1,900 feet, I think. It's above Broken Road.
1,800 feet, that's on the label.
18? Okay, cool. I was close.
Very close.
Biffed on a bunch of wine facts last night on my tasting, so don't hesitate to fact check me. Even with my little trusty sheets here, I occasionally get stuff wrong. But yes, Kyle, it's absolutely, it's just such a unique site, and it's on this crazy rootstock that somehow resisted phylloxera, even though AXR was supposed to defeat phylloxera, and it didn't, except for in this vineyard. And again, the yields are minuscule, and the winemaking is really, really passive, right? We're just trying to let the vineyard speak. And again, I need to shoot Lisa a text and say, we just tasted Close on Laundry with Stone Street Upper Barn, and I don't want to, I love busting myths, right? And most people would say, oh, you've got a single vineyard monopole Chardonnay from a producer that's been around since 1731, and then you've got a Hilltop California vineyard, well, which one's probably going to wow people more? This is a dead heat to me, man. And just in every single component of these wines, and I like them both for a lot of different reasons.
Thomas, quick question. If you were to taste these two wines blind, obviously, if it's really hard to tell the age. To completely agree with you. I think the 2011 tastes amazingly fresh, as a 9 years old. So I don't think you can tell much, about the age difference. But I guess what kind of the telling traits I can tell between Old World and New World are probably the kind of the floral notes and the heat at the end for the Stone Street. Like,
Yeah.
What would be some kind of telling traits would you tell these two wines apart between Old World and New World?
That's a great question, and I got great advice from a master sommelier named Joseph Linder, who lives here in Seattle, who was one of my mentors when I was tasting. And I was in a phase, and we all go through phases in blind tasting where it's like, oh, I'm getting all 6 wines right, and I'm crushing it, and now I can't taste Zinfandel, right? Like it comes and goes. But Joseph just said, Thomas, if it finishes sweet, it's New World. If it finishes kind of dry and bitter, it's Old World. And that isn't always true, but that was really, really good advice. Because I think if you taste these two wines together and you taste the Clos Saint Landry,
yep,
there's a little sourness at the end, even though it's the kind of sourness I like. And then if you taste the Stone Street, there's a rounder, just richer. It's not sweet by any stretch of the imagination. There's just more weight. And I don't even know what the alcohols are on these. I should look at that. 13 allegedly on the Clos Saint Landry, although in 2011 I totally believe 13 because it was cold as heck there. And then 13.9 on the Stone Street. I think that might be a shade higher, actually. For those of you on the call who don't know, in California, you get a percentage point of wiggle room. So if you hydrometer your wine and say, oh, it's 14.2, well, I'm going to call it 13.9. I'm not saying that's what Lisa did with this wine at all, but you get a tax break for the less alcohol in your wine, which is one of the sillier things that the TTB does. But again, that's a whole separate phone call. This is just a killer flight, man. Let's just take a second and enjoy these. And any other questions, and then we'll jump into the Pinots.
So thank you so much for your input there, Thomas. It was really funny because my husband, as soon as he stick the nose in both of them, he's like, oh, this is so good. So thank you so much for that. And I'm glad that this really turned on your geekiness radar because I did kind of do this on purpose. I almost wanted to be even geekier by trying to find a very white vintage of the white Burgundy and a cool vintage of the Stone Street to further.
Right.
I didn't want to do that, but I did want to bring something that to me could be harder to separate. So I'm glad you picked up on that and was able to kind of show us how to taste the difference when the wines are actually going towards more of a similar direction. So thank you for that.
Of course, and I would say one more thing. The Clos Saint Landry vineyard is not more than a few miles from, Grand Cru and Premier Cru vineyards in Puligny-Montrachet and Meursault, et cetera. But the price point on the Clos Saint Landry for what it is, and again, I'm just astounded by a 2011. There's a lot of 2011 white Burgundies that I have tasted within the last year that cost 3 times as much as this, that are under delivering like crazy. This wine it's a gem. And
Agree.
it actually tastes to me like it's far from being at the end of its road, right?
I 100% agree. I feel like those vintages that the critics usually don't like are the cooler, higher acid vintage. But those
Yep.
wines, to me, I always believe acid is the backbone for a wine to age. So those wines might not show really well compared to the big blockbuster fruit-driven vintage. But after 10 years, the higher acid vintage are the ones that are going to hold together and provide amazing value for the price that you pay for. So absolutely.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, like Kyle mentioned, the 97, 98 comparison in Napa Valley, right? I mean, 97s to me now, with a few notable exceptions, are just kind of flabby and dead, and the 98s are popping. And everybody said the opposite when the vintages came out. So awesome. And if you have questions and want to come back to the Chardonnays, we can. But I just that flight, Angie, thank you. That's super kick ass. Really, really fun to mix those two wines together. Okay, I've got the two Pinot Noirs in front of me. I mean, the first thing, if we're going old world, new world, first of all, Vosne Romanée, the Bouchard wine, this is all purchased fruit from the research I did today. And a lot of producers in Burgundy, I think for everybody on the call, again, whatever your level of wine knowledge is or understanding of how the industrial side of it works, the negociant, which is just means literally a negotiator in French, in Burgundy, buys juice, buys wine, makes their own wine, owns vineyards. They do a little of everything. And they've run their business that way there for centuries. This is negociant wine, Bouchard Vosne Romanée. They purchased the fruit and they made the wine themselves. But it's not unusual in Burgundy to have people taste some juice and that's already made, that's already wine, and go, oh, that's actually really good. I'm going to put my label on it. I know I can sell it because farmer, Gilles made some really good wine and he's got it ready to sell and he doesn't feel like marketing it. That's not a blasphemous or bad thing. A lot of great wines of the world are made that way. I'm going to refer to my fact sheet here on this just to just kind of to reiterate what I said. Purchases of grapes are made through contracts with vine growers who make a commitment to respecting Bouchard Pays strict quality criteria. We pass on all our expertise so that grape selections conform to our requirements. There's nothing wrong. There's no shame in that game, right? Even though I think a lot of people have this, but Bouchard owns some parcels that they make super badass Premier Cru wines from in Vosne Romanée, the commune sort of to the south, in the Côte d'Or. But there's nothing wrong with that philosophy or approach to winemaking. I guess that's what I'm trying to make clear. Does everybody understand my little ramble there? It's the way so many wines of the world that are revered and exalted are made. And a lot of people don't realize that. I think everybody has kind of this, there's a vineyard and there's a chateau and they farm it and they harvest it and then they make the wine and then they sell it themselves. And ironically, at Jackson Family, that's about 90% of the way we approach things. But purchasing fruit from good partner growers and farmers and then making your own wine out of it is a pretty cool thing. So hopefully, let's see where this Vosne is at. I tasted it I would hope for everybody on the call, if you have both wines in front of you, to kind of hew back to what I was talking about earlier. Man, this is a little easier to tell which one might be old world or new world. Is anybody picking up what I'm putting down on that one, right? Like, to me, the Vone is like mushrooms and herbs and earth, and the fruit kind of comes later. And the Maggie Hawk is just like, wow, that's kind of decadent fruit, oak. There's plenty of other savory components in the Stormont, but to me, the Vone Romane that is so Burgundian smelling to me. It's just textbook. It's got this cut and line and just muscular kind of intense aroma, and then on the palate, it's super delicious. I love the 14s, reds and whites in Burgundy. They've had actually a great run after a couple of rough years. 14, 15, 16, 17 to me. If you have the wherewithal and the budget, buy any of those vintages, because they're really, really good. 14s are kind of like this. They're a little bit tight, but they're still generous. 15s are just lovely and open and fun to drink. 16s kind of in between, but still pretty open. 17s are kind of profound to me. I really like the way those wines are showing. I haven't had the chance to taste any 18s yet, but that's kind of my Burgundy vintage snapshot. I'll talk about Vone Romane and kind of what it means to me for a second. You know, if you're in the Côte de Nuits, which is the northern quadrant, for want of a better word, of Burgundy, moving north to south, the regions, or sorry, the villages of note are Gevrey-Chambertin, Moret-Saint-Denis, Chambon-Musigny, Clos-Vougeot. Then you start getting into Vone Romane, Echezeaux, and then you get down into Nuits-Saint-Georges. And it's amazing to me. This might be an expensive tasting, Angie, to do in the future, but a bottle of each of those communes from the same vintage side by side is so fun to try. It costs about $300, unfortunately, to get like just an entry level bottle of one of each of those wines. But I guess what I'm saying is probably my favorite Burgundy commune in the world. Oh man, it's tough. I like Gevrey, probably the best. But to me, the thing about Vone Romane that really sets it apart, and of course I love Vone Romane, that's where Domaine de la
DRC.
It's arguably the greatest Pinot Noir producer in the history of the world. Gevrey's a little bigger and richer and rounder. To me, Vone always has, even in this AC purchased fruit bottling, has like it's muscular. It's really silky. It's got tension. It's just, to me, Vone always is a textural tasting experience, as opposed to Gevrey or Moret, where they're more aromatic and floral and, I don't know, different fruits are coming out. Sorry, I'm going down the rabbit hole. Angie, rescue me. What do you think about Romane compared to those other?
I mean, I think for every wine geek, Burgundy is always a rabbit hole that we happily jump into and never want to get out of. So I was like, oh, going down there with you. So do you feel like this 2014 Bouchard Vone Romane still need a few more years in the bottle before it can open up?
I would say yes, 100%. And again, in the times we're living in, it's really tough to buy something and want to sit on it. And this is doing a classic Burgundy thing. I opened this wine probably 3 hours ago to taste it, and it was all fruit, and kind of, I was like, wow, that's delicious. And now I'm, this deep in.
Nice.
There's my Olage. And this thing is tannic and it's fighting me back, and it's kicking my ass right now, quite frankly. I'm like, that's the Burgundy thing, especially red Burgundy, man. This wine has a lot of tannin to me right now. And when I first opened
on this thing for Bouchard, and even I think Maggie Hawks has got a little bit tannin, stem tannin in there too.
Yeah, for sure. There's Sarah Withrich, who's the winemaker at Maggie Hawk, does a little bit of whole cluster stuff. Let me get into that, because I'm still trying to process how intense and how much the Vosne Romanée has changed since I first opened it and had a taste. I mean, I've almost got Nebbiolo type tannin going on in my mouth right now from that wine. That's crazy. And like I first popped it, it was just juicy and delicious. That's the Burgundy thing. And then I'll get down to about this much in the bottle and it'll all balance out. Burgundy is wonderful. It's not my favorite wine region in the world, but it's certainly close. But holy smokes, it's a chase. Where the Maggie Hawk's at. Yeah, I would agree, Edward. I mean, that tannin to me is more from kind of oak, and it's sitting a little more on top of the wine. But certainly, hopefully, everyone on the call is getting the fact that, man, if what I said earlier, that from what one of my teachers told me is, if it finishes dry and bitter, it's old world. If it finishes kind of sweet, it's new world. I mean, to me, the Maggie Hawk is like, that is expansive. It feels like the alcohol's got more lift. It's grown in a warmer climate. It's funny because I am so blessed to talk about wine to so many people, and hopefully they get at least some of what I say or what my perceptions of it are. But for me, I don't mind talking about soil types, and I think that they're factors in how wines taste. I would much rather talk about climate, though, because if we're talking about the Vosne Romanée next to the Maggie Hawk, you're just in a much warmer part of the world in California than you are in continental Europe. It's just that's just how it is. And so you end up with ripeness and lushness, and yeah, some of it's winemaking and some of it's, but to me, it's climate. I mean, if you had your eyes closed, right, and someone asked you to taste these wines side by side and said, which do you think is from a warmer place? It would almost be, to me, almost a no-brainer to go, well, I mean, look at the color on the two wines. It's completely different. And yeah, the vintages are slightly different. We've got a 17 and a 14, but the color alone would tell me that the Maggie Hawk is from a much warmer climate. Vito, are you there? Vito usually has some good stuff to say about wine. Come on, dog.
Yeah, I'm here. I totally agree with your assessment. I think the vintage plays a big role, of course.
Agreed.
17 was definitely a flamboyant vintage throughout the North Coast, all the way to Anderson Valley. With the exception of Napa Valley, that was, of course, affected by the fires. Until then, we were having a vintage very similar to 2005. So very, very rich, very powerful, softer on the tannin, and definitely more fruit forward. So that shows quite a bit in this wine.
I love it.
Yeah, the 14, on the other hand, you nailed it. I mean, it's such an angular structure vintage in Burgundy. I personally love the 14. It's one of those vintages that I don't necessarily believe is going to age for a very long time, but 10 years, that thing is going to sing every year better. That's the way I feel about 14. So
I love it, man. And thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot there, but
no problem.
I completely agree. And I'm telling you, the Bouchard, the Vosne Romanée is like changing with every sip to me right now. It's doing its Burgundy thing. It's like, oh, that's so tannic. Oh, it's fighting back. Oh my God, that's the most delicious wine I've ever had. Oh, it seems closed down. 3 sips in 10 minutes. It's awesome.
So yeah, so that's kind of the challenge, I think, with the second set. I feel like we talk about the first set as being really geeky and very similar, almost hard to tell them apart. The second set I thought was interesting is because personally, I just feel like red Burgundy has such a disadvantage when it comes to a 2-ounce tasting section like we have now, because just like you described, you're lucky enough to have the whole bottle, but the rest of us have 2 ounces. So you really don't capture the journey that Burgundy goes through and the changes it goes through with 2 ounces. Where I think the American winemaking, Anderson Valley, Maggie Hogg, when you open it, it's bam, it's right there. It's floral, it's fruity, it's generous, it's got a lot going on. So I feel like in this pair, it's always an interesting new and old comparison, because it's always, in my opinion, I don't know how you feel about that it's always a little bit harder for the Burgundy to try to outshine the domestic wine, the Pinot Noir or World New World tasting.
You know what, Angie, I completely agree. And if you took, depending on people's palates, right? And everyone's palates are different. But if you took the Maggie Hawk and the Vosne Romanée and just blind tasted someone who might have a passing interest in wine, like they might drink red wine every day or enjoy it with dinner, but they don't, they don't want to try to pronounce Vosne Romanée, and they don't want to talk about Anderson Valley's climatic sort of complexities. 9 times out of 10, the Maggie would probably win the day, right? It's the face you make. I mean, as a floor sommelier, I got so good at pouring a wine for somebody, and if they went like this, I'd be like, are you sure you're okay with that? And if they made the yummy face, then you knew they were okay with it. And God, the Vosne just changed again. This wine's going berserk right now. It's really cool. I love it.
So yeah, I'm absolutely loving your very honest feedback on the Vosne Romanée, minute by minute is changing. It's making me very envious. I actually have another full bottle. I feel like I need to open the full bottle right now so I can enjoy that, because with red Burgundy, it is always a journey. I remember one of my teachers says you can't do a 2-ounce tasting of red Burgundy or Nebbiolo or Barbaresco Barolo, because they change so much throughout the journey. So I guess I'm trying to say is buy a bottle later and drink it slowly through the night. That's what I'm saying.
And I'm not trying to make anyone jealous. I'm just, what I usually do with these tastings, just so for the call, is, although I'm not sure I'm going to do that with as good as these wines are tonight, but I usually shuffle next door to the neighbors and throw a 3/4 bottle on their doorstep and just say, hey, another Zoom tasting. I think that's something we might need to look into at Jackson Family, is getting the portioned tasting components out there. Yeah, no, I know. I've done a bunch of it with Christopher Bates from New York, and we've done a bunch of it at the Quartermaster Sommeliers, and it's just, I love, as a quick aside, the UPS driver and the FedEx driver since COVID think I am just the biggest drunk in the world. They're like, dude.
And don't forget the people that's picking up their trash every day, the recycling.
Oh yeah, and the recycling bin is an all-timer for sure. Yeah, the FedEx guy was like, I need to see your ID the first time he dropped off wine, 3 months ago. And now he's just like, I'll leave it on the porch. We're good. Anyway.
Thomas, I have a question.
Yeah, please.
I was wondering if you could comment on Anderson Valley, maybe for some people who don't drink a ton of Anderson Valley compared to, Russian River or even Willamette Valley.
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. I kind of got lost in my shipping story. So to me, if I take the three main, I'm going to keep it on the North Coast. I won't even go into Santa Barbara right now. But if I take Russian River, Anderson Valley, and just compare those two, what are the differences, right? They're not geographically crazily far apart. Our vineyards that we farm, and this is all off of a single vineyard that's at about 1,200 feet of elevation. The Maggie Hawkstorman is. Russian River is it's a warm area, Healdsburg, Santa Rosa, essentially. It gets really, really warm there during the day. It gets cooler at night, which produces great acid in the grapes and keeps them fresh. But if you taste Russian River Pinot Noir, you're going to get this ripe, lush, pillowy kind of texture, still beautifully complex. If you go up to Anderson Valley, as you move kind of northwest toward the Pacific Ocean, our vineyards are all at what they call the deep end, so we're closer to the Pacific Ocean than a lot of vineyards in Anderson Valley. To me, Anderson Valley is always about more aromatics. It's a little more savory. It's a little more, the texture's like, this is a rough wine word to use because it comes out of my head, and it's crunchier. It's not as supple. It's got a little more kind of, the texture's different, way different than down in Russian River where it's much warmer, and I get just different aromatic complexity from Anderson Valley, and I get just there's more blue fruit like blueberry and boysenberry kind of than ripe red fruit that I would get in Russian River, like raspberry and even some black fruit like black cherry. I know that was all very confusing, but that's kind of how I would try to differentiate the wines.
Yeah, Thomas, if I might interact on the Anderson Valley as well, it's definitely one of the most misunderstood appellation. One thing is it's a newer AVA, of course, relatively newer from a consumer standpoint, but also because what we have right now in the market that defines the appellation are stylistically wines that tend to resemble in a way to the Russian River. So they aim at ripeness, they aim at round style of Pinot. As Thomas was alluding to, we're located at the far northwest corner of Anderson Valley, so what is called the deep end, where oceanic influence is a lot more predominant. And also elevation, anywhere from 1,200 feet all the way to almost 2,500 feet. Pinot produces wine that's slightly more structured, slightly more angular, aromatic, perhaps less ripe, and more on the herbal component, maybe black tea, maybe a little bit of sage, so that forest floor that you find in cooler climate Pinot, without losing the identity of being a Northern California Pinot, of course, but having more of those flavor components and aromas compared to the Russian River.
Vito, that's so spot on, man. I completely agree. I would invite everyone on the call to open a bottle of Anderson Valley Pinot Noir and Russian River Valley Pinot Noir, and what Vito just described will become apparent pretty quickly. But yeah, that was very well stated. All right, any questions about the Pinot flight?
You have an opinion.
You have anything you want to add?
Well, I think it'll mess up because of that.
Oh, go for it.
All right, I think we're going to move into the Merlot-based wines. And obviously, we're moving up significantly in body weight and texture here. Lasag is going to be the first wine that we taste, and to me, that wine and that estate, and Vito knows a ton about it. And if I miss any of the dots here, V, just connect them for me. But it's an estate in Saint-Emilion, which is in the right bank of France, which is the sort of spiritual home of Merlot on the planet. This is made by a gentleman named Pierre Sean, who is one of our winemaker emeritus. I don't think emeritus is a word, but you guys know what I mean. And this is for those of you who know and love Bordeaux, this property has been around for many, many years. 1738 would be when the estate was built, and started to be farmed. And then, we've got great neighbors. We've got places like Chateau Pavier, Chateau Troplong-Mondot. Like, these are we're on this slope with a very specific soil type in that part of Saint-Emilion, and all the chateaus that are our neighbors are world renowned. And I think that this wine, especially, I want to make sure it's 16. Yes, it is. Bordeaux, speaking of tough vintages, 11, 12, 13, they got beat down in terms of wines that you'd want to drink on an everyday basis. 14 got a little better. 15 was terrific. 16 was terrific. And I think that approachable right bank Bordeaux young right bank Bordeaux is a very rare and wonderful thing. And I love how this wine is showing right now. I like, to me, Merlot-based, and this has a big chunk. I'm going to look at the fact sheet just to make sure. This has kind of become the blend. A lot of Saint-Emilion wines are about 80 Merlot, 20 Cabernet Franc. Like, that's kind of the general blend. This particular wine is 60 Merlot, a bigger percentage of Cabernet Franc, 33%. And then there's a little bit of Cabernet that's farmed there. This has got 7% Cabernet Sauvignon. So, one of the things about Pierre Sean is he loves Cabernet Franc. He loves its kind of pungent aromatics. He loves its expressiveness. But I just think this is such a great wine from a incredibly pedigreed site from a wonderful vintage. And it's not very often that I open a 4-year-old bottle of Bordeaux from either side of the estuary that I go, oh, I can drink that right now. And I think this one is really, really approachable.
Yeah, if I might say something about the estate, and you mentioned that the presence of the Cabernet Sauvignon in the blend, it's not very typical for the Saint-Emilion Grand Cru appellation. However, where we are located on the Côte de Saint-Emilion, and with our adjacent neighbor, we have a huge chunk of limestone soil that kind of runs through that côte, and limestone and Cabernet Sauvignon with that climate have proven to be fantastic in blended wine. Us, Angelus, Pavie, and Tête de Bœuf, all four of us, we use a little bit of Cabernet Sauvignon in the blend, just because we have the luxury to have that limestone component in our soil. So Pierre has the ability to blend those three great varieties, when most of Saint-Emilion has that 80-20 split, as you were mentioning, 80 Merlot, 20 Cabernet Franc.
Yeah, and to Vito's point, just to geek out even further, generally, Merlot likes clay soils, and Cabernet likes more rocky soils, and so that mixture that we have on our property allows us to the added sort of measure of complexity that a lot of the chateaus in Saint-Emilion don't have. So it's pretty cool. I agree, Vito. Thanks for pointing that out, that it's super rare to have any Cabernet Sauvignon in a Saint-Emilion.
correct.
There's you could probably count them on two hands, right?
You're right. You're right.
So, well, everybody like the wine. Do you? It's always so hard to tell when I talk about approachability, especially since we're not sitting in the same room. But I think it just this wine pops, man, and a lot of times young Saint Emilion to me is like it's a fun tasting exercise, but it kind of requires me to think. I almost think the tannin in the Vosne Romanée is harder than the tannin in the Saint Emilion. It's crazy.
Yes, I agree. And would you say there is a bit of earthiness, barnyardiness in this wine?
For sure. That's kind of a signature of Bordeaux in general, is that kind of farmhouse, herbal. Part of it's the grape variety. I mean, grape varieties, Bordelais grape varieties like Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, they always have a savory, bell peppery, herbaceous component. And this wine has that for sure. You know what really rocks my world on this wine, and I think, on this call, everyone's heard me say it a million times, but I'm a very texture driven wine drinker. Like I can talk about black currant and red cherry and blueberry and whatever kind of fruits in the wine, and structurally I can break it down in tannin, alcohol, and acidity. But to me, it's a mouthfeel thing. Like, does it coat your mouth? Or again, as a great reference, is it like the Vosne Romanée where it just slams you? And I love the velvety sort of silky thing that Pierre captured with this wine and this vintage. What I'd say.
Well, I love it. Let's compare it to our.
Please taste the Mount Brave.
Mm-hmm. I know Francis was trying to ask earlier, how would you describe the aroma on the Mount Brave Merlot?
To me, Merlot has, and this particular wine is such a blockbuster. This is made by a gentleman named Chris Carpenter, and I think, and I'd love you to jump in whenever he feels
absolutely
right. But this is made by a gentleman named Chris Carpenter, who makes blockbuster style wines. He makes our La Jolla wines from the single vineyard sites that we farm in Mount Veeder and Diamond Mountain and Spring Mountain and Howell Mountain. He makes amazingly intense wines from a property we farm in McLaren Vale in Australia called Hickenbotham. He makes these wines off of a site in Mount Veeder on the west side of Napa Valley in the Mayacamas range that are from about 1,200 to 1,600 feet of elevation. But Chris's winemaking style, to me, and I hope everyone's tasting the Mount Brave Merlot right now, it's a blockbuster style. And again, that's a hard word to define in the world of wine, but hopefully, again, going back to texture, and I'll talk about Mount Veeder really, really quickly. To me, Mount Veeder, whether it's Cabernet Sauvignon, and this wine has 18% Malbec in it. Am I right about that? Check that. Yeah, 82 Merlot, 18 Malbec, which we farm some beautiful Malbec up on that property. There's so much everything, right? That's just kind of Chris's winemaking style. The wines are elegant, but they're super powerful. And I don't know if everyone on the call is getting that out of this Merlot, but it's, holy smokes, if anyone thought Merlot was a shy, quiet, wimpy grape variety, this wine will probably change your mind, right?
Absolutely. I feel like after the movie Sideways came out, Merlot got kind of beat down a lot. People are really dissing Merlot, and Mount Brave is actually one of the Merlot I would show to clients who think that Merlots are weak or, tasteless or boring or whatever it is, once you taste this, you will change your mind. For me, I always feel like the Monbray Merlot, I've loved this wine for so long because it like I said, it's like I will not be denied. It walks in the room and tells you that it's there. And it's got a lot of very satisfying kind of that coffee bean cocoa thing going on, which I always find very warm and inviting, especially when you're having a hearty meal or any kind of fatty meat. So that's probably what I love most about it.
I would agree, and I think talk about pretty the clearest delineation from the question we had a little while ago about how do you tell New World from Old World. This one's pretty stark, right? I mean, but what's ironic and what I think is really cool is the oak regimen on the Mount Brave is not that different than the oak regimen on the Lesage. It's just not. It's just where they're grown, when they pick, and each wine just has a really, really strong sense of the place it comes from. These wines are not vinified that differently, but they couldn't taste more different, right? And I think that's one of the reasons we all love wine. That's one of the reasons that it continues to fascinate me is how two wines based on the same grape variety from different places, from different climates, you could put them in front of almost anybody and they'd be like, there's no way these are made from the same thing in the same way. And of course there are some differences, but I hope everybody on the call is understanding that's what makes it cool, Mm-hmm. That's what makes it fun.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Thomas. I mean, especially when we're discussing, the earthiness of Bordeaux, which often is associated with winemaking, but we also have to understand the climate. In Bordeaux, they are basically an oceanic maritime climate on a cooler side, in which once you pass the 31st of August, you have to cross your finger, you're going to make it to ripeness. Versus in Napa, we have the luxury consistently to push the boundaries of ripeness and wait to pick, almost an extra month. That makes a huge difference stylistically and from a flavor standpoint. As far as Mount Brave goes, the factor we also add in elevation with a site that has the ability to capture early morning sunlight. But later on, grapes tend to be protected from that direct sunlight, allows Chris to push a little bit more that ripeness. That's pretty much the fundamental difference between these two wines. It's really climate.
That's awesome.
Yes, I absolutely love to add on to that. I know tonight's thing was Old World and New World, but I purposely take wines from the New World region that is not super duper over the top New World, if that makes sense. I want everyone to be able to taste the difference between the Old and New World, but I didn't want it to be because of excessive extraction or excessive winemaking in the back end that causes the stylistic difference. I want the stylistic difference to come from the climate and where the wine is from. So I hope everyone's getting that.
100%.
Awesome.
Yeah, what an amazing series of wines and specifically, well, generally, I'm so proud and honored to be able to talk about the wines from Jackson family, but specifically Regal Wine Company in California. Man, it is so fun to get my Burgundy groove on. I miss you guys. I miss working with you down there, and it's really, really a blast to. I love all the wines in the portfolio, but it's really, really fun. That 11 Bouchard still is like, my mind's blown about that. It kind of illustrates to me the reason that I got into wine and I love wine. If I saw that wine in a wine shop, I'd be like, I don't know, 11 Bouchard. I know Clos and Landry, it's a great vineyard, but that thing's going to be dead as a doornail. It's probably, you know, and it's like tasting it. It's like, no, that thing is singing. It's really cool.
Awesome. Yeah, yes. Thank you so much for kind of sharing your thoughts. And I love how honest and direct you are about how you feel about each one of the wine. And I'm just so honored to be able to taste alongside you. But now that we've gone through all 6 of them, and I love how people are so active on the chat, on the group chat too, talking about which one they like, which one they don't like. While we still have Thomas here, if anyone have any questions, comments, anything, now will be the time to unmute yourself and let's party. Don't be shy. Do you have a question earlier?
Hi. Hey, Frank C., I saw what you just said. I just went back to that. Frank said, well, I mean, if you guys can read the chat, but wow, the Bouchard White finally opened up. What a difference.
I opened it up late, so I opened it up right.
No, dude, I completely agree. I
was kind of like, I'm not tasting anything, and you know, half an hour later, I was like, what?
Dude, and I got it up to about 58 degrees now, and it's a whole nother ball of wax. It's really cool.
Thomas, you mentioned about Burgundy wasn't your favorite region. Can you talk about what your favorite region is?
Of course, Cindy, thank you for asking. So I will qualify it by saying this. To me, wine is about moments, right? It's about who you're with and what you're doing now more than ever. And when I did this beautiful brisket on my Weber kettle, that's how I still smoke stuff. I'm not a green egg guy. I know that makes me an outlier, but yesterday, so I did a killer brisket. 5 hours, I drank a bottle of Provence Rosé with ice, and it was wonderful. And when I go to board of directors meetings, I'm on the board of directors for the Quartermaster Sommeliers, and we drink the sickest, craziest Burgundies and whatever. Those are my favorite wines too. It's a moment in time to me more than it is a chase for the ultimate flavor situation. That said, if I had to pick a region of the world, I can't pick one wine. I get asked that all the time. I would take the Rhone Valley. I in France, and that is a narrow second to several places in Italy that I enjoy drinking their wines from. But Northern Rhone wines based on Syrah, Côte-Rôtie is one of my favorite appellations in the world, and Hermitage Blanc. I actually like Condrieu. Not many people like Viognier, but I think it's terrific. And then probably my favorite grape variety in the world is Grenache from the Southern Rhone. So Châteauneuf-du-Pape or Baccarat or Côte de Rhone or just whatever. That's, if I had to desert island it, and again, that makes me very unmaster sommelier-ish that I didn't say, Riesling or Burgundy, but those are probably, that's my favorite wine growing region on the planet.
Oh, thank you, Thomas.
Yeah.
Thomas, could you go a little further and give a couple of your favorite Rhone producers?
Absolutely. So in the north, I love this guy named Bernard Burgaud, Burgaud. In Côte-Rôtie, he makes just these smoky, funky, insanely, passionately expressive Syrahs. I like Thierry Allemand up in the north too. He's kind of a natural wine guy, and natural wines generally aren't my thing. Man, talk about a wine. He makes Cornas. Once you open one of his Cornases, you better leave it open for 3 hours before the funk blows off, and then it's a glorious experience. In the south, man, I love Udangeon. I love up north, of course, the Mac Daddy is the Jamet brothers, Jean-Luc and Jean-Paul. I love Udangeon. I love I just love Chateauneuf-du-Pape in general. There's so many different styles, and some people are fermenting in concrete. Some people are doing barrel ferments. It mirrors the style of food that I like to cook and I like to eat. I like kind of robust, big flavors, and those wines sort of tend to match up with that. I am not a very good edible balloon or composed tiny scallop on a plate guy. That's just not my jam. There's nothing wrong with it. That's not my personal way that I like to eat or cook. So
I love this. John, I'm sorry, Thomas, I'm going to ask this question for John. John asks, is there really a big difference between first label wine and second label wine for a rookie with limited budget?
Oh yeah, and specifically talking, probably John, you're talking about Bordeaux, right? I mean, in general. So one of the that is such a great question, and it hits very close to an area I'm super passionate about. One of the things I did when I got the job as wine buyer at the Metropolitan Grill in Seattle is I went berserk on second label wine, like Lafort de Latour or Echo de Lynchbage or all these different wines that are essentially just declassified. They're harvested at the same time by these big chateaus. I'm blanking on what Margot's second wine is. Anyway,
Pavillon Rouge and
Pavillon.
Yeah, Pavillon. Thank you. Thanks, guys. But there's so many. I used to know every single one because that was something I had to memorize for my exam. Clearly, I haven't had to take a test for a while, thank God. But anyway, to your excellent question, I took such a position on those second wines. What's the, oh gosh darn it, what's the Coste d'Esternel? La Pagode de Coste. That one, I went berserk on it because you can always find those wines for, like, I remember one of the first big buys I ever made was Pagode de Coste 2004. And I was like, well, it's vented the same way, just the guy in the cellar didn't think it was as good. Coste d'Esternel is $100 a bottle wholesale. Pagode de Coste is on closeout for 20. I'll take 10 cases. And I just rocked with that wine. I had so much fun selling it. It's a story that you can tell. It's made in the same place, right? Second wines are what it's all about to me in Bordeaux for value, because you can really do some damage. And again, if we can even draw the parallel to the purchased fruit in the Vosne Romanée, which is amazing, delicious wine. Or we could buy, I don't know what Bouchard makes Grand Cru in Vosne, but they make something. I think they make some Echezot or whatever that they own and farm. So again, you're at like $140 a bottle for the Echezot, or the Vosne Romanée is $50 or whatever it may be. But Bordeaux second wines were my serious go-to, especially being a steakhouse guy, because you get to tell that story at a table and people just love it, right? You go, oh my God, this is essentially, it's not the same wine, but it's grown and made in the same place by the same people. It just costs $70, not $350. Boom. So yes, I'm a fan.
I love it. That's a mic drop moment right there.
Questions, comments? I want to respect everyone's time and let you guys go eat dinner if you need to or whatever. I'm happy to stay on.
Yeah. Can you hear my husband? He was trying to say a question, I think. Can you hear me?
You might be on mute.
I'm not. That's so weird. Can you hear me?
Yes.
But
He
you
needs
can't
to
hear
be
my husband?
closer to the. He needs to be.
We can't hear him.
You have to like shout to the microphone.
Yeah, I was just wondering, why is it that Burgundy changes so much over time? It's made with the same grape, Pinot Noir. Why is it that it goes through that up and down kind of journey? Do you have an opinion on that?
Man, I have a lot of opinions on it. It's so crazy. That's a great question. To me, again, I think I alluded to it briefly. Burgundy is just the biggest chase in the world, man. When it's good, it is so good, but you will spend a lot of time and money trying to find out when it is good. and that's not the best Burgundy testimonial I think I've ever done, considering Regal has beautiful Burgundies from Vineyard Brands and Henriot, but I can't figure Burgundy out. I'm telling you right now, the Vosne Romanée, the Clos en Landry, these two wines have gone this throughout the hour and 15 minutes that we've been together on the phone. As the temperature changes or whatever, where I would say California or Oregon Pinot Noir would not go through that dramatic a change. And I wish I had a factual answer to give you instead of this mythical sort of viewpoint, but white Burgundy and red Burgundy, man, it's a beast. You can buy a $20 bottle of Marsanne, which is from up north in the Côte d'Ivoire, and it's going to taste way better than a bottle of freshly opened DRC. Not for the whole night. Not for the whole night, but that just doesn't work. That's like me saying I could buy a bottle of Josh Cabernet and open it next to a La Coya Diamond Mountain Cabernet, which is actually my favorite La Coya that we make, and that you wouldn't notice the difference. You would. It'd blow your mind. So I don't know, man. Burgundy's just that's why it's essentially 4 grape varieties if you go up and down the whole region, right? You've got Chardonnay for whites and Aligoté as you go down a little bit south. And you've got Pinot Noir and you've got Gamay as you go into Beaujolais. And it's confounding. There's 630 Premier Crus. 600, well, there's actually, it's undefined. There's at least 630 Premier Crus in Burgundy. And I forget the number of Grand Crus. I think it's like 49 or something, whatever. But again, we're only dealing with 4 grape varieties. Italy's easier. Italy has 1,300 indigenous grape varieties and the whole country is a vineyard. It makes your head spin around. And then Germany is like trying to get past the language, freaks everybody out. Mm-hmm. And there's so many different grapes. Yeah, Riesling's important, obviously, blah, blah, blah. But Burgundy's it varies from 20 feet over here can taste so different than 20 feet over here. And it still obviously confounds and mystifies me, but it's fun.
Thank you so much, Thomas Price, for that. That's amazing. And this is such an amazing tasting. I feel really honored to be here, but I do wanted to do a quick announcement. I know a lot of people are on the group chat getting really excited, asking me to reserve certain wines. Besides the 2011 white Burgundy that we only have 12 bottles of, the rest I do have enough, I think, for every wine if needed. And we are doing a 10% off of every single bottle if you want to purchase it. So why not go for it? And Also, I want to thank Vito for being here. Vito is actually the Spire Collection partner, so he's
My
responsible
pleasure.
for
My PIC clutch, bro. Thank you.
exactly. So he represents, I believe, the Mount Brave, the La Sec, the Maggie Hawk, and maybe the Stone Street, but I don't think the Stone Street is part of their collection. But yeah, but it is amazing. I mean, I know it's getting late, so does anyone have any last minute question you would like to ask Thomas before we go to dinner with whatever wine we have left?
Sorry, Angie, thank you. I just have one last one.
Yes.
If it's not too late, sorry to keep you guys waiting. I'm kind of a rookie at all this, so I might have a dumb question. My question is, so is it for, I guess, the old world wine or French wine? A lot of them are blended wine versus where, so I'm in Santa Rosa right now, actually, where local Napa region wine, they're single grape wine mostly.
So Vera, what I'd say is, as a general rule, if about old world wines from Europe, they are generally named after the place or the vineyard that they come from, and then you have to deduce the grape variety, right? So, like if you look at, like I'm looking at the Beaune Clos en Landry and the Bouchard Vosne Romanée. If you don't know that there's Pinot Noir in there and you're kind of new to the world of wine, it's like, what the hell's in it? No idea. Where in the New World, generally, it says Stone Street, Upper Barn Chardonnay right on the label, so you at least have a point of reference. And, Mount Brave says Merlot right on the label. And so I think it's a big generality, and there are a few different outliers, but generally, Europe names wines after the place they come from, and the world names wines after the grape variety, and then designates where that grape variety is grown. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you so much.
Of course.
I've been looking forward to this tasting for a while. So
oh, thank you.
I traveled from Bay Area to Sonoma today, and I didn't want to miss this. So
thank you for joining us. I appreciate that.
Thank you so much for hosting this, and thank you, Angie.
Of course, my pleasure.
All right. Anyone else have any other question? Or I think we're just going to call it a night, and everyone can go ahead and enjoy their weekend. But please, before we go, just want to thank Thomas and Vito again for your time and hosting this awesome event. Thank you so much, you guys.
Thank you, everybody. It was an absolute pleasure. Thanks for sitting in. It was great.
Thank you so much, Thomas. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. My pleasure, guys.
Bye.
Anytime.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Getting